Hello everybody, and welcome to another edition of our Community Access. Now this week, we have our friend Bill Parker, who is the editor from Michigan Outdoor News, who will tell you more information about fish in Michigan. All today on our Community Access. Welcome back. Now this whole program will be on fish. With the story is our reporter Terry Stiles with the editor of Michigan Outdoor News, Bill Parker. Terry?
Hi, welcome to another special edition of our Community Access. Again today I have Michigan Outdoor News editor Bill Parker here, and we're going to catch up on what's happening in the spring in Michigan right now. Bill, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Always a pleasure to be with you guys.
So we need some updating. It's been quite a while. I think we were just hitting spring the last time you were here.
Yeah, I think there might have still been ice and snow maybe a little bit back then.
Yeah. So yes, I think there was some snow. It was sometime in March. And now, even though the weather doesn't say we're well into spring, we are well into spring and almost approaching summer. And so I guess the first question I have is, what's in season right now for hunting and fishing?
A lot of fishing opportunities right now. Spring fishing, I think, is often overlooked by a lot of people, and it's some of the best fishing of the year. A lot of species are very available to people right now, and very catchable, if you will. And there's also the late turkey season is ongoing right now. It runs through the end of the month, so people have an opportunity to go out and get a license. The guaranteed hunt is in May, and you can go out and buy a license right now if you have an opportunity to get out in the field. It used to be you had to apply and couldn't hunt unless you got a permit. Now they have a late season that's open on all over the state except public land in southern Michigan. You can't hunt in public land in southern Michigan right now with that guaranteed hunt, but everywhere else, private land and public land up north, there's a lot of opportunities for turkey hunters.
What's the reason for that change? I know that it was some time ago they actually brought turkeys in to replenish our stock, so to speak.
Yeah.
Is that the reason?
They sure did. Well, actually, you're right. That's a very good conservation story, that the resurgence of the turkeys, if you will. At the turn of the century, they were almost gone from Michigan. There weren't very many turkeys, one here and one there. And they had a really, really big program back in the 80s. They caught and captured turkeys in, I believe it was Iowa and Pennsylvania, and brought them here and released them. And then we moved some birds here in Michigan when the flocks, started to prosper really good in some areas. They'd take a few birds and move them to another area. So right now we have a population of over 200,000 turkeys across the state, mostly in the lower peninsula. There are a few birds in the upper peninsula, but the majority of them are in the lower peninsula, and the further south you go, the more birds there are.
So it's weather
yes,
related?
Exactly. They have
related.
Right. Well, they do have some prey issues, with coyotes and things like that, but mostly it's the winters. They have a hard time surviving the winters, especially up north when they have a lot of deep snow. They have a hard time moving around, and they expend a lot of energy in that deep snow when they try to move around, so sometimes they can't get enough calories to offset the energy that they're burning, and they have a hard time surviving up there. And the reason down here in southern Michigan that they don't have the public land open in this late hunt is because most of the turkeys are on private land. The number of birds on the public land isn't quite as large, so they want to keep that a little bit more managed and not put as much pressure on those birds as the birds in the public land, or on the private land rather, where there's a lot more birds.
A lot. No matter where you go, you see them. So that brings me to, how about pheasants? I happened to be out kayaking the other day, and it was early morning, and I could hear a pheasant. And it occurred to me, oh my gosh, we don't have a lot of pheasants.
No, you haven't. You don't hear that very often anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Pheasants, have been on the down cycle for a long time here in Michigan, and they're just starting. They've got some programs, the DNR and Pheasants Forever, and some other groups are working to try to create more habitat. What they've had in the past is there'd be a farm over here that has 40 acres, and he puts in some spring habitat, and then a farm over here puts in some more habitat. Well, they're trying to do it now on a landscape-wide basis, and they're trying to get everybody coordinated and say, okay, if you're going to put in spring and summer habitat, we'll put some winter habitat over here, so they've got a place to survive the winters. And they're making, making waves. It's a slow process. Unfortunately, everybody wants things to happen overnight, and unfortunately, it doesn't work that quickly. But I think we're headed in the right direction, and I like the program. It's called the Michigan Pheasant Restoration Initiative, and I think they're making waves and doing some really good things in Michigan to try and bring pheasants back, at least to a bigger population than what we have now.
Well, so are they also bringing birds into the? I know that they're not native of Michigan anyhow.
Right.
So the pheasants that we do see, in fact, there's two right downtown Detroit on a corner, an empty street corner, and we've seen them. But are they're Chinese pheasants that we do see?
I believe I believe that's where they initially originated from, and they are going to look at the opportunity to maybe bring some birds in. They want to get the habitat established first, and the feeling is that if, kind of like the old build it and they will come scenario, if they create the habitat, that the birds will be there. I hunted at a friend's property up in the Thumb last fall, and he has about a 200-acre farm that he manages specifically for pheasants, and he has a ton of pheasants up there. It was unbelievable the number of birds that he has on there, just from planting the right grasses and planting the right habitat for the pheasants to thrive in.
That was my question. What is the right habitat?
Yeah, it just depends on, there's a lot of different plants that they need for food, some that they need for cover, and some that they need for shelter, and it's getting the right mix of that. If you plant all just food, then they're well fed, but they have nowhere to escape the prey or nowhere to escape the elements of winter. So you have to have kind of a little bit of balance, and that's what they're trying to do on a landscape-wide basis now. So hopefully we'll make some strides there. And the DNR said if we get this and we see a need to bring some birds in, then they'll try to work with some of the states, probably out west. There's a lot of birds out in Kansas and the Dakotas and areas like that, and I think they'll try to work out a deal to either buy them, or maybe we'll trade some fish stock or something like that, and make it a a good deal for everybody involved.
So their motivation would be wild birds that they bring in rather than
farm raised.
Right.
Yeah. Usually the farm-raised birds don't survive well in the wild anyway.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, so that's why they would try to get some more stock of some wild pheasants that have a little better durability and a little maybe wiser, if you will.
Right.
But so that they have a better chance to survive and establish a flock. Yeah, exactly. And it's funny that you mentioned about the birds down in Detroit. There's a lot of pheasants in the city of Detroit because there's so many vacant grassy fields.
Oh, right.
And that's perfect for the pheasants, and they find enough cover to escape the cats and dogs and things that are down there. And coyotes, exactly.
Yes, that seems to be a great place for bringing wildlife back. The peregrine falcon are doing well down there.
Right, and they had the nests up in the buildings, in the tall buildings. Yeah, you wouldn't think of the city as being a wildlife area or refuge type place, but there is, and coyotes.
It's just an era for Detroit to come back all the way around.
That's right.
Really nice.
Yes, exactly.
I want to move on to what is good hunting right now and fishing, but I also want to mention, I don't want this conversation to go without mentioning, it's really nice to see the egrets again and the herons, and I have been fortunate enough to see eagles down here. So whatever DNR is doing, it seems to be working.
Yeah, a lot of birds. Yes, a lot of birds are making a comeback. Like you said, eagles.
Yeah.
When we were kids, we never saw eagles at all, and now I saw one yesterday. I was on my way. I was up in not Newberry, but
oh my,
north of Grand Rapids. Anyway, I was fishing a lake over there with a friend and saw an eagle on the way in that was eating some roadkill, and I saw it from a distance, and I thought, wow, that looks like an eagle. When I got close, yeah, sure enough, it was. And sandhill cranes, another bird that I didn't even know what a sandhill crane was the first time I saw it, because I had never seen any before, and they were really making a comeback. And I think a lot of those birds' recovery has to do with our attention to the pesticides and DDT and things like that really caused a lot of problems with birds back in the 60s, and it's taken a long time for them to recover, but they're making big strides and coming back, and like you said, now is the best time to see them in the spring, because they're all out and around, and you can see them on the edge of the lakes fishing, and babies, right? A lot of goslings running around and ducklings right now, so it's a neat time.
Speaking of that, how about swans? Now, they're not native to this area, and we're seeing a lot more swans, and I just heard a really awful, it's hard to watch attrition happen. But I heard an awful story that swans actually are territorial enough that they're killing the baby geese.
Yes, I've actually seen that dynamic in action. They're very territorial, and when there's a little lake over by where I live, and we have ducks and swans nesting on it. And when the geese seem to nest first, and the swan wants that nest, they come in and basically take it over. And I haven't actually seen that bad, but I've seen them chasing those geese, and the geese getting out of Dodge in a hurry because those swans are about 2 or 3 times the size of a goose. And there are 2 species. There's mute swans and trumpeter swans. And I always get them mixed up, so I don't want to say which one's which, but one's native and one is not native. The ones with the solid black bills are the native swans, and the ones that have orange and
thing.
I think those are the non-native ones that are, and those are the more aggressive ones, and the ones that they have problems with. You've probably heard of kayakers and canoers being attacked when they get near a swan nest in the spring. They'll come out and go right after them.
It was my next question was, or I was going to make a statement about people needing to be very careful about that. Because didn't in Lake Orion a gentleman get really beat up by a swan?
It seems like a few years ago, maybe got his canoe was tipped over.
Yeah, I got too close to a swan's nest the other day, and they let me know, that's for sure. So for anybody out there on the water, whether you're fishing or just enjoying canoeing, kayaking, stay away from the swans.
Yes,
because they are aggressive.
If you see them raising those wings and kind of cocking their neck back, just turn and go the other way, and they'll leave you alone, and you leave them alone, everybody will be happy.
And they seem to give you enough warning you're not too close to their nest. I happen to know where the nesting swans are on the lake that I live on, and I went close, didn't think I was going too close, and they let me know long ahead of time I was way too close.
They're not very tolerant, are they?
No, they're really not. So let's get into fishing. You said right now it's a good time to go fishing. What's legal and what's not right now?
Well, right now everything is open for the most part. There are some real special seasons like sturgeon on Lake St. Clair, but for the most part, bass fishing is open, pike fishing, walleye fishing, panfish are all legal right now. They just changed the bass fishing regulations in Michigan this year. They opened up catch and immediate release all year long. So if you catch a bass, take it off the hook, let it go, you're okay. In the past, you couldn't even fish for them. Technically, if you happen to incidentally catch one, you're okay, but you couldn't go out with your bass gear and your bass boat and target bass. You can do that now year round. The catch and keep season is the same as it has always been. It's the Friday before Memorial Day, so that's opening up soon? Tomorrow.
This week.
So that season is open. Muskie, walleye, and bass season opened the last Saturday in April, I believe it was, April 23rd or April 25th. So that's all open, and panfish are open pretty much all year round. And the fishing right now is fantastic. I've been very fortunate here the last couple of weeks, or the last week actually, to get out several times and had very good success here right in Lake Orion. Fishing for panfish. We caught some really nice crappies and bluegills, and a friend of mine. And then a couple days later, my brother John and my daughter Janelle and her boyfriend Kyle and I took a trip over to St. Joe and got a charter out into Lake Michigan for trout and salmon, and we did really good. We didn't catch any king salmon, but we caught a few coho and a lot of lake trout and a couple steelhead, so we did really well over there. And then yesterday I was up in Newego with another friend fishing Hardy Pond, bass fishing, and caught largemouth and smallmouth.
Wow, so you're eating good right now.
Yes, everything's really good, and the fish are very cooperative right now. It's a good time to be on the water, yes.
So they're spawning right now though, right? And
a lot of fish are, yes.
Okay, time to fish.
Yeah, nature makes it, so that there are a lot of eggs and a lot of small fish produced, because, a lot of other species depend on that for food too. And the DNR sets limits on the number of fish you can catch and the number that you can keep. If a lot of people went to one specific lake and caught their limit every day and went back the next day and went back the next day and keeping their limits, you could certainly, have an impact on a lake, especially at this time of year. But most people that go out catch enough for a meal meal or maybe a meal or two and freeze a few and, you know, have some for
Sure.
dinner and, you know, enjoy the resource for what it is and not try to just take everything that you can possibly get. But that's what is really good right now that makes some of them very vulnerable because they're easy to find, they're easy to locate, and they're very aggressive defending their territory, just like the
Sure, right,
swans, you know.
right.
So if you cast a lure or put a bait, you know, in their area, they'll usually come and attack it, and you get some really good action. And like I said, as long as everybody doesn't, you know, take as many as they possibly can,
right.
we really don't have an impact on the species overall in a lake. Because there are so many eggs and so many, you know, baby fish born into the system, you know, nature provides that so many of them are going to be taken and so many of them will survive, and it seems to work pretty well because they keep coming back year after year.
Our lake is just full of little fish right now.
Yeah.
So are there, is there a good place that people could go to find size limits per fish, as well as the amount of fish you can take?
The DNR website has a lot of fantastic information on it. And the website is www.michigan.gov/DNR.
Okay.
And then that takes you to their homepage, and you can click on fishing, and they even have best lakes for bass, best lakes for walleye, and they have a county by county listing. Like in Oakland County, I think there's 350 lakes or so here in Oakland County, and they have maps on a lot of them, especially the public lakes, and you can pull up the map, see where the launch is, you can find out where, you know, sunken islands or real deep drop-offs, their contour maps and stuff, so that gives you a good idea. And then they have some other information as far as what you can go to their stocking database and see which fish are stocked with walleye or stocked, you know, with other species of fish, so you'll know if you're for instance, if you're targeting walleye, you wouldn't want to fish Lake Orion. There are a few walleye in there actually, but it probably wouldn't be a good lake to go if you're looking for walleye. They would have some other options on there, you know, that would be a little bit better for you, and they've got that all laid out. A lot of really great information that they can give you where shore fishing opportunities exist. If there's a pier on this lake that you can take your family, and if you don't have a boat, you can still get out and maybe catch some good panfish and have a nice day on the water.
And so, do they keep an eye, is it the DNR that stocks the
Yes.
lakes? And then how often do they do that? Does that depend on what is being brought out of those lakes?
Yeah, a little bit of
eye on
everything.
those
Some lakes have, like their lake association will, in cooperation with the DNR, sometimes they'll run a walleye pond or a pike marsh on the lake, and that actually, you know, feeds the fish back into the lake. The DNR does a lot of stocking and a lot of rearing. They have 5 state hatcheries around the state that they raise different species of fish in, and then produce, you know, they take the eggs into the small fish, into the fry, and then they release those. Usually it's done in the spring, and it depends on the lake. They go out and they assess the lake, and they do some netting surveys and see what the population looks like, and then they decide, well, you know, we want to put X number per acre into this fish every year or every 2 years or every 3 years, depending on, you know, how the fishery is and what they find in their surveys. So it's really it's a scientific process. I mean, they don't just, you know, arbitrarily throw stuff in here and there. They really look at it, and some lakes, you know, have enough predator fish in the lake that they don't want to add another species. Sometimes they don't have enough predators, and the panfish tend to get very stunted because a lake will only hold, let's say a lake will only hold 100 pounds of fish.
Oh, right.
So you could have 100 1-pound fish, you could have 50 2-pound fish. So they figure out, you know, what the lake will sustain, what the population that's in there looks like, and sometimes if you have a lake with a lot of stunted fish, they'll put a predator in there, maybe add some pike or some walleye that'll feed off on some of those fish and give the fish that survive an opportunity to grow bigger.
Right, that makes sense.
So yeah, so
Seems like
it's a process.
They did some stocking of muskie up, speaking of Newberry, in the Curtis area. I can't remember the name of the 2 lakes up there.
Manistee Lakes, maybe?
Yes, upper and lower.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it really disrupted the entire balance of the lake for a while. That was
okay.
Several years ago, maybe 15.
Yeah, and that happens. Sometimes they have to back off or change their prescription for what they're putting into the lakes.
Yeah.
But all in all, they do a really good job. And last year, I forget now the number, but I think they stocked something like 10 million fish across the state. And that, you know, they do a lot of trout stocking, of course, and they still stock a few salmon in the Great Lakes. They stock walleye, they stock pike. Usually not panfish species. That's, you know, usually like a lake association will say, hey, we want some more bluegills in here, and they might do something along that line. But mostly the bigger predator fish and the larger species of fish are what's stocked for the most part.
So will they do that even for private lakes? If private
No, mostly it's just
association?
public lakes that
Okay.
have public access. Now, private lakes can be stocked, but then usually that lake association has
Their
to come up
onus
with the
to do it.
financing and stuff, right? Because the DNR only stocks and really does assessments and surveys on lakes that have public access.
So bass fishing, I'm not a bass fan,
Mm-hmm.
the taste of bass. Are most people, or do they do bass fishing for the fight?
Most of it now, especially in the last 10 or 15 years, there's just been a really big push on for catch and release fishing just for that reason. You know, bass are good to eat, but they're not great to eat.
Yeah.
Bluegill are a lot better, perch are a lot better, walleye, of course, are very good.
Sure.
And even, you know, rock bass, sometimes people give rock bass a bad reputation that, oh, they don't taste good, they're not good, they taste like a bass. Rock bass are really pretty good to eat, and people that have never had them before should give them a try.
okay.
Because they're not bad tasting, they're very mild. But your largemouth bass, it tastes very fishy. It just has a real strong
Muddy.
fishy taste. Yeah,
right.
so most people don't eat them. They fish them for fun, and of course there's tournaments now, a lot of tournament anglers, and they catch and release for bass. So that's a lot of fun and a good opportunity to get out and enjoy the resource. But because so many people are releasing them now, the populations in a lot of these
Well-
lakes are really good. You catch a lot of really big bass now, where, you know,
Which are
20
fun.
years ago you had to work a little harder to find those 20-inchers and stuff, and now they catch them pretty regularly.
And so what about catfish?
Catfish are very good too. Catfish are kind
in
of,
our healthy condition right
yeah,
now?
they don't, I don't think they get the recognition they deserve because they're very good eating. And
sure.
you mentioned catfish down south, it's a delicacy,
Yeah,
you know,
it
and up
is.
here I think we're just kind of spoiled with our trout and our walleye and stuff. But the people that are avid catfish anglers really get after them and have a good time, and they're tremendous fighters. They're a blast to catch.
Yeah, well, that's what made me think of it.
Yeah.
And are they in all lakes or only
No,
certain
they're
particular
just
lakes?
in some lakes. I don't know any lakes right around here that have catfish. I know there are some.
Orion used to
Did they?
when I was younger, but I haven't heard or seen them.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any in there anymore. I
fished
don't
them
think
all
there. Yeah, I don't think there are. No, there's bullhead, and I hear people that have eaten bullhead and say they're very good too. I've never tried them, so I can't really give my opinion on it. But they're a different kind of fish. They don't have scales, you know, and they're kind of slimy, and then that turns a lot of people
Yeah.
off right away.
They're
Oh,
ugly.
how do I even deal with this
Yeah,
fish? Right.
right.
But I've talked to people that have eaten them and said they're very good.
Oh, okay, well, that's encouraging.
I'll have to take their word for it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think I'm going to try.
No.
And so to wrap up this, although I love the topic of fishing, there's one day in May, is it, that it's an open, you don't have to have a license, free
Yeah,
fishing.
free fishing weekend. It's coming up in June. I
June.
believe it's the weekend of the 13th, 14th, or 15th and 16th, right around in there. And
DNR
I
will know.
apologize. That's on the DNR website, and we also have it listed in Michigan Outdoor News. But yes, it's free fishing weekend. Everybody can fish state-wise without a license. The regular rules still apply, and the bag limits and things like that are still enforced. You just don't need a license. It's an opportunity for people to take somebody that maybe doesn't fish, doesn't want to go out and spend the money on a license. Here's a chance to take them out and show them what it's all about. A lot of communities and organizations across the state have organized fishing derbies and things like that, and kids opportunities for kids to go out and fish on free fishing weekend. So it's really kind of a neat thing that the DNR started. And they also have one in the winter. In February they have a free fishing weekend for people that want to give ice fishing a try too. So it's kind of a neat thing.
Those
Yeah.
brave souls.
With a heater, yeah.
You do have, at what age do you have to have a license?
16, I believe it is.
16.
Yep.
And you got to have one right here and now, whether you're catching bluegill or trout.
Right, anything you're fishing for, you have to have a fishing license, and they just changed the license structure this year. There used to be 2 different licenses that you could buy, one for everything except trout and salmon, and then an all species that included trout and salmon. And when they redid all the license structure at the DNR, they eliminated the limited
Exception.
species one, and they just made it an all species. I think they cut the price by $2 from the all species
Right,
one, but people that were only buying the limited one are
They're not
actually
happy.
paying double almost now. So they're a little frustrated because some people say, well, I don't fish for trout, I don't fish for salmon, I don't want to be able to because I don't
Sure,
fish for
you
them.
don't
Now
do
I'm
it.
paying double, and all I fish for for is bass. So it's a little frustrating for those guys. But in the big picture, it all goes into fisheries, research and management, and those fish that are stocked. Somebody has to pay for that whole process and everything.
So we should be grateful.
It's a good program, and the money is well spent, and it's going into the fisheries division. It's not going into a pool and divvied up everywhere else. So it's a good thing, and it's still only $24, and you get to fish all year long. So that's a pretty good deal.
It is. Not to mention, it's really great to be where they're at.
Yes.
I want to ask you a few more things about DNR and their restocking program and wildlife habitat program, but I'm going to take a break.
All right.
So stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to our Community Access. Special guest Bill Parker has been sitting here with me for the last 20-some minutes. It's always amazing to talk to you, and I have so many more things I want to ask you about. However, we're running out of time. But one more thing, we talked about the fish and the fowl around here and the hunting and what's going on right now. We didn't mention morel mushrooms. If we could talk about that real quick. I hate to cut you off, and we're going to have to wrap it up. And I want you to come back because there's so much more to talk about. But that was the only thing we really didn't talk about today.
Yeah, it's prime time for picking mushrooms right now. A lot of people are finding a lot of good eating out there right now. The big thing that people have to watch out for is to make sure that they're true morels, because there is another type of mushroom that looks very similar to morels, and if you eat them, they can actually be deadly. Usually not a deadly thing, but people have died from them, and it'll just make you very sick. So do a little bit of research, go online. The basics, and don't take this as the concrete rule, but if the cap attaches to the stem, it's a morel. If there's a gap between the cap and the stem, it's a false morel. So you really want to look at that. But do some research if you're not familiar with morel hunting. Go online, buy a book, video. There's a lot of really good information out there that will help you identify them so that you don't have any trouble and you just get the right ones, and they're very good to eat.
It's
very
just
delicious.
Impossible to get the information as to where they're at.
Right.
It's so funny. I've never even tasted one in my life, and I've talked to so many people in Michigan that go morel hunting every year, and so when I say, okay, so where do you go? I'm not telling.
Out in the woods? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So you can go basically anywhere in the state of Michigan.
Yes.
Right?
Yep, and any public land, private land. A lot they grow around, dead trees, old elm trees and stuff, if you can find some of those, or old apple trees, abandoned apple orchards. But you'll find them in a lot of different areas too.
The birds carry them, don't they? Or I know that I've heard before.
The spores, the spores are the one thing that's very important. If you do go out morel hunting, take like an onion bag with you that has holes in it and put them in there, because the spores will fall out and they'll repopulate the area. But if you take them and put them in a paper bag, you're not letting those spores get back to the ground. So shake them off a little bit, bang them on your knee, and then put them back in the bag and carry them around in those onion sacks, so that if there are spores falling off, you'll put them back into the ground and have more mushrooms next year.
And so, is there only a certain time for them?
In the spring, yes. It's in usually, and it's weather related, temperature and water. We need to have a little bit of rain, and we need to have a couple 70-degree days, but it's in May, usually late April, early May.
All right, this is a good time to do it, and I'm not going to let you go until you promise you'll be back.
Absolutely, I'd love to. It's always fun, Terry.
I love having you here. Thank you for joining us today. If you want to see Bill and you don't get us on Charter Channel 191, go to OCCTV.org and you can see Bill's show anytime you want. Thank you for joining us.
There you go, fish people. We hope you enjoyed Bill's information. Now, if you would like to get a subscription of Bill's magazine, check it on your computer, Michigan Outdoor News. Check on subscription, and it'll only cost you $22 a year. We hope you enjoyed our program. So, for our reporter and our editor, Terry Stiles, I'm Bill Service, and you have a great, great week.